This meeting
stream.
is a host or a participant.
I got it.
Thanks, Christy.
Awesome.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Got it. And there is a way for live transcripts or closed captioning to be put on too. So let's see. I put on transcripts for that. All right, Bill just messaged me. I see that he is joined, and hopefully Ronnie will be coming in pretty soon too. We'll just wait like another minute or two and to make sure everybody comes, and then we'll get started.
Sounds good.
All right, so I think I'm going to get started here, and I wanted to first say welcome to everyone, and I'm excited to put this out here. I'm excited for this event. I think this is an important topic, and it's something near and dear to my heart, and I think that it's important to be having this conversation. So before I get into the main event, I want to let everyone know at any time you can either type messages into the chat to make sure to ask questions or comment. And you can also raise your hand. Or just let me know if there are any questions or comments, and we would invite the audience and everyone to participate and be active members in this. So I will go ahead and introduce myself, and then I'll pass the mic over to Bill for him to introduce himself. All right, so my name is Liz Spingola. I have received my doctorate degree in engineering from Virginia Tech a couple years ago, and I now work at IBM. And there's Ronnie. And my pronouns are she and her, and I'm excited to get started on this. I'll be curating everything, and I'll be the one who's asking questions and just making sure that we move our conversation forward. So Bill, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Bill Dush. My pronouns are he, him. I got my PhD in physics at Penn State, I think 4 years ago. I also work at IBM. And I'm co-chair of the Global Neurodiverse at IBM Business Resource Group. So yeah, and my day job is a data scientist. So, yep.
Oh,
There we
I
go.
guess I should have said that too. I'm a data scientist and accessibility expert at IBM, and I do consulting for the federal government.
Yeah. And I work for the IBM CIO, basically the IT department of IBM, I have to say. So am I showing it to anyone else, or is it just
Yeah, so Ronnie, if you'd like to introduce yourself, go for it. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, all right. We'll get this whole virtual thing eventually. My name's Ronnie. My pronouns are he, him. I am a environmental engineer. I work for Bell Environmental. We are a landfill consultant, and I graduated 4 years ago now with 2 bachelors, one in civil engineering and another one in environmental.
Awesome, and thank you both for joining us. Bill and Ronnie will be the other 2 participants in this panel. So I'm pretty excited to get started. So we talked a little bit about the fields that we are in, and I need to remind myself to slow down and not talk super fast, but we are more in the technical fields. We are all 3 of us are engineers, but I believe a lot of the concepts that we are talking about go further than just engineering. And I can speak a little bit towards education. So in my undergrad, I also got a math education degree and was a K-12 math teacher for a short period of time in my life, and then taught engineering in academia. So I can speak a little bit to some of the different fields a little bit more, but we have a little bit of a diverse group here a little bit, but it's mostly in the technical fields. So I'd like the first question to start off with is, why did you choose the field that you're in? Did it choose you, or how did you navigate to where you are today? And either one of you can go first.
Okay, I guess I can go. So let's see. I got my PhD in physics, and I'm a data scientist now. So it's definitely different now because I don't actually do physics in my day job. So near the end of my PhD, I mean, I went into physics because I just like, well, I love physics basically. It was based on my special interest at the time. So I'm autistic. It's different for those who don't realize. I got diagnosed when I was like 12 or 13. And in going into data science, I basically decided like I didn't want to stay in experimental physics. But I wanted to do something more mathy than just like a regular software engineer, but I did like coding. So data science seemed to be a good fit. And particularly I chose IBM partially because of the location. My family moved to the Raleigh-Durham area in North Carolina while I was in grad school. So this would be a great time to have like a good company near the area where my parents live. So, yep, that's me.
Thank you.
See?
Yep, go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah. Out of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Kind of got pushed into engineering, went back and forth, even while in school, between engineering, education, landed on engineering, and now I'm almost a decade later and work different jobs. And in the past year now, I've been recently diagnosed with ADHD. So finding that out later in life, plus trying to now navigate adult life, has been very different. And, very lucky that I landed a job with a company that I really enjoy. And that's also just very accepting in general.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm also diagnosed later in life with autism. I grew up with knowing that I had ADHD and chronic anxiety. Going into undergrad, the anxiety got much more pronounced. and became a staple in my life. And then in graduate school, I started understanding myself a little bit better and got diagnosed with autism along with that. And I think it's an interesting intersection too, because a lot of people think that you're either ADHD or ADD or autistic, but many individuals, there's some intersectionality there. And especially with other cognitive disabilities and differences that we have here. So kind of understanding like the intersection of all of that, I think is important too. So kind of like Ronnie, I thought I told myself that I wanted to be an engineer for as soon as I got out of high school, and I did, but it was more me being stubborn. So my parents and my whole family is in the medical field, and they're really pushing medical field, and I decided I did not want to be in the medical field, almost as like a defiance kind of act. But the more that I was in engineering, and my great uncle, he was an engineer, and he kind of mentored me and really showed me a lot of different passions for the wide aspects of engineering. So I did that, but I also, when I was in engineering school, I realized that I craved like the human aspect. And that's why I decided to do the math education degree too. So I decided that it was important to make a balance between technology and understanding people, and like instead of it almost being like cold and impersonal, it was really important for me to find the passion and in engineering. And that's kind of what I did in grad school as I moved to really focusing on accessibility engineering. So I solely look at digital accessibility, and I look at how can we move past compliance into making an inclusive environment in general. So I get to do some fun things at IBM. I am working on a federal contract where I work with the Office of Personnel Management, and they're working to fulfill an executive order from President Biden on disability, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And they brought me in as accessibility to help with this. And it's been a really fun project and just exciting just to be in that space, to know, okay, well, here's my niche, and I started being able to apply a lot of my AI background, so artificial intelligence, and start utilizing that where it intersects inclusion and diversity. So that's pretty exciting. And yeah, so I know I rambled a little bit about as to why I am in the field that I am and why I chose it, but I think it's more of like a winding path, and more importantly, it allows me to explore a whole bunch of different avenues without having to be super focused on like one particular thing. I get to dabble a little bit, and that's probably helpful for my ADD mind, where I get to do a whole bunch of different little things and then bring it all back in and get really passionate about a couple of things all at the same time. So yeah, I talked a little bit about the next question, so I'll pass it off to the other speakers about this, but how did you navigate your education, both in an accessibility standpoint or accommodation standpoint, and just social life and in general?
I guess I could start. So by education, what education are you referring to? Are you referring to just college or high school or what?
Let's start with high school. Let's start with high school, and then we can move into college.
Okay, so let's see. I got diagnosed when I was 13, and this was like back in like 2000 or so. So this was like very early in terms of like the whole mainstreaming process. So I did get sent to like a school for just autistics, but they at the time they didn't really like, this was like a middle school basis, so I was 13 or so. They didn't really know how to handle like, I guess people, well, I guess people like me, like, exactly in terms of people who actually were like able to getting like good math grades and things like that. I don't know. It was more catered towards towards like people with more learning disabilities, I think specifically. So I had to get like specific tutors in order to get like to pass my state exams. And eventually I did start to join like the first kind of like a guinea pig for like the mainstreaming projects, the mainstreaming things for disabilities for like autistic specifically. So I was like in 2 high schools because like I was like in 1 year for one high school, and then the program closed and I got sent to another high school basically after that, both of which was not technically the high school I would have gone to if I wasn't diagnosed, because that didn't exist in Ward Melville at the time. And also Ward Melville would have been like the larger college, the larger high school, and also it was like too big basically. So I mean, socially I didn't have a social life back then. I was basically just on the computer all the time. Like I at that point I just basically gave up on actually socializing in real life, even when I was part of these programs basically. I'm not sure. I certainly didn't feel like I fit in or anything like that. I mean, I did at least successfully get to college at the time, and that was considered like it was enough for me to get like a county-wide award just for going to college at the time. This was back in 2004, because it was rare with people diagnosed with things like Asperger's back then to even go to college in the first place. People are diagnosed, granted. So so I did, and I went to Stony Brook, which was a local university. It was just like a mile away from my campus, and I was first in biomedical engineering as my major. And like my social life still was like non-existent because I had no idea where to start, things like that. Even I was still chronically depressed throughout like all of high school and also undergrad too. And so I mean, at first like biomedical engineering, but like I guess as time go on, I realized my real love was physics, but I basically kind of like waited until like the last minute until like my senior year to actually change over. And then I just remember like I was cutting classes at the time, like my mom saw me, got pissed at me, and I went off of college for like a semester. Like I took like a break basically because this is happening. It was kind of a cycle in terms of like the first one I first got diagnosed, and then I had like really bad setback, and like this time again in college. But then I eventually got back and switched my major to physics and all, and so at least that I knew that it was the path I wanted to go on. And like even like with all this, was still I wanted to get my PhD. I mean, that was one thing I did want to do, but I just didn't feel like it was fully meaningful just being in biomedical engineering compared to physics. So I eventually took like 3 more years, so it was 7 years total in terms of undergrad. Still no social life there because I didn't know how, and I also had like really terrible social anxiety at the time. I did have medication at least near the end, I think, but still, I think I just like decided at the time just to give up, at least with medication by the time I left, which in retrospect was a mistake. But so then after I got accepted to Penn State for grad school, that was a whole thing in itself, just in terms of the whole process. But it was like the first time I actually felt like fulfilled in terms of actual mission. Like it was like one thing in terms of undergrad was like whatever, because I wasn't fully in line with like my own interests basically. But once I got into physics and realized I want to get my PhD, that's when I fully felt like I mean, my dad was actually proud of me to actually get to the point. Like they had to like really push me, and I was like really scared. I honestly kind of felt like really helpless, and I kind of think in retrospect was part of my upbringing was being like too coddled, I guess, or something. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I was pushing myself to actually like being willing to like grow. I don't know, but I don't know what my parents would have done better. I mean, it's a whole thing in itself, dealing with parental interactions. Anyways, so I did go to grad school, and like once I went to grad school, I was at Penn State. This was like 4 hours away from my home. Like it was a different state altogether. I was dead center of Pennsylvania, and I realized like I needed to change fast because like at home, while I didn't socialize with anyone, like I was like, I mean, I was still at least near my family or things like that. So at least I had that there physically. But there I was like completely alone. I realized I need to at least do something at least socially. And I at that point I decided like simply just being online wasn't enough for me. So that's when like I did really hard. And yes, in terms of like the accommodation process, I did like learn how to advocate for myself in terms of like the disability accommodations from the beginning. I mean, my mom also was a huge advocate in high school too, for me at the time, but at the time in college, I knew I needed to. So at least I knew about what I needed in terms of like the accommodations. And I had like double time in tests and things like that. And also like my special separated tests and things like that. Part of it was like rollover from high school since I had it then. I didn't actually get a chance to do it in time for the SATs, but in preparation for grad school, I did get like a reassessment basically for everything, to make sure I can get what I needed for like the accommodations in grad school. In retrospect, I definitely need for the not the SAT, I mean the GREs, the GREs and the physics GREs specifically. So, all right, when I went to grad school, I did just look at the accommodations. I was actually, I don't know, when I actually asked if there's anyone who got it, apparently there weren't that many people, disabled people actually got accommodations in grad school, which I was so surprised at the time. But I did successfully get it. I very specifically got it for like the quals specifically, which was a really freaking good idea because I was like one of the first people to actually pass it the first time in my department. So I was at least happy I had that, but socially in terms of stuff, I was still like a disaster, but like that's what I actually learned often like painfully through like many different types of social situations. And over time, I did finally learn how to connect with people. And at first I simply just went to everywhere I was invited, though I didn't connect with people, but eventually I did learn how to connect with people. And that's when things started to go in. Probably to say like after like my third year of grad school, third year of grad school is when I finally started having close friends. And like by the end, I was like knowing I was like this outgoing grad student. We're outgoing the actually traditional extroverts. And I was like a complete like shut-in, like from the beginning of high school. And people still can't like recognize it or realize that now. It's actually helped me a lot. Like I've also like by the end of grad school, like I was able to like connect with anyone in any different department, say, hey, what does data science to your field, basically? And I actually just learned and absorbed so much information from many different other fields to be able to help. And like I even befriend like a bunch of social scientists. And like I was a physics major who at the beginning like didn't even care about any social science at all. And now I work with social scientists in my day job now. With a bunch of like user researchers typically and things like that. And actually I've done research in the social science stuff. And so it's actually just cool like how I've gone like both interdisciplinary and I've got the point where I can have real close connections with people. Actually, I have plenty of close connections, or at least I've had close connections. And I'm just really grateful for at least that my path turned in the right direction. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Bill. I think that was really insightful, and I can talk a little bit about my experience, and then we can go over to Ronnie. However, I did want to ask and put out and remind people if they do have questions or comments, to feel free to utilize the chat function or raise your hand or just let me know and we can communicate that way. So for me, I had some friends in high school and whatnot. I definitely was thoroughly involved with the accommodations, especially with my ADHD and anxiety and all of that. Making sure that I had testing time, a room by myself. I'm very particular when I take exams, and if I don't have things the exact way that I need them, I over focus on that and do really poorly on the exam. So making sure that I have that in place, and then going on to college. So I went to college in Ohio, and my parents are extraordinarily involved parents. And that's good things and bad things, but it's just the way it was. And I'm grateful for all of the help they did. But they were the ones who helped with the accommodations in college. So getting through all of that and making sure, so basically they were my advocate for me. And going through all of that, and I still struggled a little bit. I struggle with perfectionism, so I try to make sure that everything is 100% absolutely perfect, and then I set myself up for failure. And I think I took way too many classes at the same time also. If I redid it, I would take less classes at a time, but accommodations definitely helped me, and going in and doing some therapy definitely helped me. But going into grad school, so I went to Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech is 7 hours from my parents. So I kept getting further and further away from my parents. And in that, I didn't think that I needed accommodations, and I kind of was like staunchly against having accommodations. I didn't really accept myself as a disabled human. I kind of was like trying to think, I don't know, I thought like it was like a dirty word, like I shouldn't be saying that, hey, I'm disabled. And I did not well my first semester of grad school and into my second semester. And then I had to take some of like the big grad school exams, and I did minimally. And then I realized like, hey, I need to get accommodations. It took 6 months, and me being re-diagnosed with chronic conditions. ADHD doesn't go away. But anyways, they made me re-diagnose with that and pay out of pocket for that as a grad student with no money. And then with that, I then got into therapy, and they're like, you should get diagnosed or tested for autism. And then I was like, oh, this kind of makes sense. And going through trying to get accommodations and all of that made me really open my eyes and get involved a lot more with disability studies. So understanding that the process and the history of disabilities, and understanding just kind of the timeline and what our history in the United States was with all of that. It really opened my eyes and made me realize that disability isn't a bad thing. It's just a thing, and it's a part of who you are. And why not celebrate all the parts of who you are instead of being ashamed of parts of who you are, because there's no shame in who you are. And after going through that whole mind process and all of that, grad school became a lot easier because I wasn't trying to reject a lot of myself. I was getting a lot of the help that I needed. I still struggled socially a bit. And then I started working as a graduate student, I started working in the IT office where my now husband worked, and he really helped me bring me out of my shell a little bit too. And he was local to the Virginia Tech area, so he had a lot of friends around there, and that really helped grow my social networking group in general, just having him in my life. So he's definitely helped me. He's been my #1 supporter in a lot of that stuff. So I'm very, very lucky to have him with me to help me navigate the last bit of grad school and be able to cope with a lot of different things, and having him help advocate for me for accommodations and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of my educational journey and accommodations. And I definitely should have gotten accommodations earlier in graduate school, and life would have been a lot easier for me if I actually accepted all of my identity instead of rejecting it. So with that, I will turn it over to Ronnie. Ronnie, you can talk a little bit about your history.
All right. I guess with me, high school, I was heavily involved in sports and drama, the quiz team. I did post-secondary classes, which I went to the local community college and took college classes 3 of my 4 years. Always honor roll, different things. Like Liz, the perfectionist was there. And I was constantly doing stuff. And high school went all right. I kind of floated between social groups, never finding just one spot to fit in. I just kind of drifted from one to another. And that was kind of how I existed. And at that point, standardized testing, stuff like that was fine for me. As you know, my first whoa moment was I took my ACT 5 times. Trying to get a better score to get into different schools, get better financial aid packages, stuff like that. And at the time, it really didn't hit that maybe, maybe there's something else happening. And then I hit college, and my first year of college was a disaster. There was a lot of chaos in my life. Coming out as queer to my family did not go over so well. That added a layer onto it. After my freshman year, I took a semester off, transferred schools, ended up at Toledo, where I spent really the next 3.5 years still struggling. It was always really when it came to testing, and I had multiple professors, bring me into their office and be like, what's going on? Like, you do really well on the homework, you can explain it to people, like your labs are great, but you hit this test and then it's a roadblock. And it was such a hard, as from a student that went from straight A's continuously all throughout school to college, to where I'm barely scraping by with a 2.5 and really just spinning my wheels in time. I spent 6 years in undergrad. I always like to say it took me the first 4 years to finally figure out what I needed to really get the grades I needed. If you look at just my last 60 hours, it's like a 3.6, I think, GPA, but the first 4 years was right around a 2.3, 2.5, and it looks like 2 totally different people. And it took me that long to realize what I needed to do, how to study, how to prepare myself for an exam. And even in that point, I still didn't dawn on me to go and start, ask my doctor, ask questions of, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, like when I sit down and take this test. And so did find those last 2 years, and looking back now, I was also a really voracious reader growing up too, and now it's so hard for me to touch a book if it's not for a class for work or something now. And going through in the past 2 years, going through my transition, really my whole path started. My doctor asked me, like, hey, are you doing okay? I live in Cleveland. It is gray and cloudy most of the year. Get really gnarly seasonal depression. And she's like, well, let's try an antidepressant, see how you do. And that's when it really hit that helped with the depression and the anxiety I had. And then it seemed like, as I was talking to my therapist, knock, knock, the ADHD was there, because I was feeling better, but now the focusing really wasn't there. And with work, we go through really busy periods and really slower periods and those busy periods, like I need the concentration, but I didn't have it. And so started the process beginning of last year. With COVID, I would say COVID had made things easier to get diagnosed because you didn't have to go through the diagnosis process of sitting with somebody that doesn't know you for 4 to 6 hours to go through testing. And it worked out in my favor that way. And meds have really helped, and I'm excited. I'm actually going back to school starting in the fall to see the changes going forward. Wishing that, you know, looking now, I would have loved to have been able to do better, because I think those first 4 years of school where I struggled so much would have been a lot easier and not so, I wouldn't have been so hard on myself. And now I'm at a weird point now where I'm like excited to go back to school and just to see how it goes, because I'd love to go back and actually go to grad school and, you know, get a master's, even a PhD, and take my time. But I was completely burnt out by the time I was done with school. And I'm hoping that doesn't happen now. Also, like Liz, being a dual major, I had 4 to 5 semesters where I had 18 hours every semester. And the first 2 went horribly. And then that's when I started to figure out what I needed. And the joke between my friends in college was that, well, we always know where to find Ronnie. He's up on the 3rd floor of engineering. And that was the case. I didn't move. There was a few professors from other departments thought I was a grad student because I was always up there. And I was like, no, I'm up here because it's quieter. And if I need to ask a question, it's not that far of a walk for me. And so that's really where I spent my last 2 years of school, was in the same spot. But yeah, it was a challenge. And, you know, going forward now, I'm going to see how my first semester goes, working full-time, going back part-time to see if I should start the process of looking for accommodations. Going back for my surveying certificate, it's a little more hands-on than a traditional classroom setting. So I'm like, it might not be as needed because it's not so much of a book thing, it's using stuff. So we'll see.
That was an awesome experience. Thank you for sharing that, Ronnie. And I completely commiserate with you. Everybody was like, where is Liz? Oh, she's in the Biggs building. She's in the engineering building. That's literally all she ever does. So it was definitely an interesting process, and I'm so excited for you to go back and knowing that you know yourself a little bit better and all of that. And you brought up some really interesting points, and I kind of always think about especially like cognitive disabilities, and maybe it goes into some physical disabilities too, especially ones that are a little bit more complex. But it's almost like an onion, like you pull back one thing, you figure something out, and then you pull it back and you're like, oh, well, now that this is figured out, this is glaringly obvious now. And you like pull back different things and you're like, oh, so if I actually do work on myself a little bit and get the help and the support that I need, then I understand that it's not just me being difficult and like life, it shouldn't have to be that difficult. Like understanding yourself a little bit more, understanding the limitations that you have and the different things that you need to advocate for yourself to make sure that you get what you need. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. And I just was talking to my coach, my manager at work, and she was phenomenal. In this past year, I was having some really bad anxiety and elements, etc. And she was like, be open. What do you think you need? Right? Like, for me, I was like, okay, if somebody leaves something open-ended, I won't get it done. I need to make sure that I have a deadline, and I need to make sure that it's a feasible deadline. And because if not, it's back to what I was saying previously about being like a perfectionist. I will sit on it forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and then it will never get put out. Or I'll sit there and be like, oh, well, this isn't pertinent, so I don't need to do anything right now, and then put it off. But in reality, they actually wanted it like yesterday. And I was like, well, you could have told me that. And I don't understand a lot of like the colloquials within industry and realizing, and even in academia, which is a different conversation, but being able to say, okay, this is how I'm understanding something, and this is what I need. Is that doable for you? And is that something that is my understanding correct, right? So I guess this is a really good time to transition into, how did you transition from your education into industry, you know? So education sometimes can be tricky, but somewhat structured. So it's a little bit different than going into industry, and we're not always articulating accommodations in industry. So, or what we should be looking at for as far as what you should be looking at as a company and all of that. So I guess I will go first and talk a little bit about how I transitioned a little bit from education to industry. So I did it a couple of times. Like I said, I taught for a little bit, and for a lot of my story, it was important for me to have chunks for teaching. So I taught 6 weeks in the summer, twice, and I taught semesters, but I wouldn't teach for a full year because I couldn't handle that. And knowing my burnout and where I'm gonna fall was something that's really important for me. So, and a lot of times we talk about that in academia, especially in the department that I was in, where not everybody wants a tenure track position. So some people want to be the adjunct professor. Some people do want to be just research professors. So they're just focused on research. So understanding what works for you, what is your passion, and knowing that, like, I tried doing a full year and I was like, I can't, I absolutely cannot do this. And it was eye-opening to me. So I think understanding some of those differences and understanding what was necessary for you. Also, I think a big thing for me was, do I disclose in the application process? So having a lot of like self-hatred in the beginning of my life with like disability aspects, it made me realize that sometimes I was scared to like disclose, and I didn't want to be seen as different. And that's why I didn't get accommodations in the beginning of graduate school. But being more accepting of myself, I realized that some people still have that kind of stigma, right? So do you disclose whenever you're applying to something when you have the privilege of having a disability that you can hide or mask? So I think it's really an interesting topic. And there were some companies that I didn't disclose to, and there were some companies that I did disclose to. So for me, I looked up the companies and saw their diversity statements, saw if they had anything on neurodiversity and cognitive disabilities. What are some of their plans for medical plans, if that include mental health? Trying to really figure out some of the commitments for different industries and different businesses in general. What was their comfort level on disability? So I think that was kind of one of the big ways that I navigated asking. So the other thing is, as a programmer, which I ended up being, a lot of times when you apply for industry jobs, they make you take a programming test. So you have to sit down, and before you even get an interview, you have to like do the little program, and like they give you these problems and you have to like do this little test thing. So I knew that a lot of times I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. And I wouldn't feel comfortable, well, I wouldn't necessarily not feel comfortable taking those exams. I didn't feel comfortable having to ask for accommodations for those exams to get an interview. So I specifically looked for jobs where I didn't have to take those programming exams. So I didn't have to disclose, because a lot of times in the jobs, they weren't transparent as to who got that information, whether that was internal just to HR or whether that was now attached to my profile as a potential employee for the rest of my life. I didn't know how comfortable I felt with that, or if that would put me in a different category with that. So that's basically how I navigated at least the application process and kind of transitioning into that. And when I started, at the very beginning, when I started IBM, I actually chose not to disclose, and I only disclosed last year and my two-year stay at IBM so far. So I felt guilty about that, but yeah.
Mind if I go next or what?
Yeah, go for it, Bill.
All right, Liz, first of all, you know that if you networked with me and you had disclosed with me and with all your background, I would have like networked you like forever in terms of like getting a job here. You know that, right? Like you have like the perfect background. You sell yourself short in terms of like all not just advocacy and like your engineering, but so don't ever put yourself down when it comes to that. Seriously. Like
well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Bill. And when you have a chance, we do have a question for you in the chat. You can either answer it verbally or in the chat itself.
Socially active in college. How did you break out of it? Okay, with regards to that, well, it wasn't in college, it was grad school when I broke out of it. I'd say exposure therapy in a sense of like, I was just actively, since basically everything was anxiety inducing for me, it's like, okay, it doesn't matter how uncomfortable it is, I'm just gonna be uncomfortable. And I know that if I do it eventually, I will eventually move through it. So I just got used to going in incredibly uncomfortable new situations, just with the hope that eventually it will go away. After I, if I didn't, it wasn't exactly perfect, and I stumbled through a lot. But I just basically just learned that the stumbling was important, because I just learned that the ability to learn from my experiences was something I did not have, and it's something I needed to do. So I mean, I just basically had this growth mind to like basically I knew it was like smart in physics and things like that. So I'm sure I could learn the social side of things, basically simply because I am that smart. I mean, someone put in my mind, so one of my intern friends did back then, and it's like, yeah, that's true. And I kind of like held it through there in terms of my ability to move. I just studied a lot too. So I eventually got a lot of theoretical knowledge, and I just continued just practicing until I got to being successful. so there's that. Okay, back to my thing. So by the points where I had gone in, I had already like created like a summer camp for autistic high schoolers in grad school. I mean, I know Liz is doing like probably far more outreach in the disability space than I did when she was in grad school. So don't ever sell yourself short when it comes to that stuff. Okay, it was actually kind of like bad timing for me because my mom was dying of cancer as I was graduating. So that was tough, but at that point in time, I had developed an incredible amount of resiliency. And I just basically, like, I was moving down here, my mom was dying, and I had a new job at the same time. And it was quite a lot, I'm sure, for anyone. But since I've been in like really bad situations before, especially like this one time in grad school where I actually like, once again, this kind of cycle where I had to like take a break, basically. Although I was still actually coding from home, but I just wasn't back at Penn State for a while. But I eventually went back. So I just basically just learned from them and just made sure I got the support I needed. I also had therapy. I made sure I had some friends here who were local, and actually a friend from grad school actually like went down here to support me while my mom was passing away. And I had like a month basically, and I basically said to myself, okay, I got a month to get through this shit because I want to be able to successfully like start my job. Because at that point I was like really foreign in terms of actually starting. I did not disclose my disability accommodations at IBM at the time. They didn't really have a neurodiversity stuff at the time. Like I came in before Liz on that. So I didn't know how to do it back then, especially because I was afraid in terms of potential things. But in retrospect, knowing that things are a lot different now at IBM, if I do what IBM's been doing now, I totally would at the time. And anything with any type of like autism work or neurodiversity program, I feel would be more comfortable at it. It's also, I'm in a different place now than I was just entering, because I'm now, it's, once I realized that neurodiversity is a D&I factor in a way, it becomes like a lot easier to sell that aspect to people. I think more than just oh, this is disability, things like that. It's like identity factor and like another D&I factor, a lot of volunteering effort, things like that. So there's like actually like lots of pluses even outside of the factor of things like accommodations. Once I actually joined IBM, I was Googling, or not Googling, not because it's internal. I was going through the internet and I found like this, at the time, Autism at Skill group. I found a Slack channel, and then I just introduced myself because I felt like comfortable enough to just do it, because considering my PhD background, hey, my name is Bill Dush, I got I'm autistic, and I got my PhD in physics at Penn State. I felt comfortable for myself to do that. And like right after that, this distinguished engineer like messages me and tells me to chat with her. This was Beth, by the way. And like she introduces to me and like tells her an experience that she has like autistic son herself, things like that. And like, it was like the most important connection of my time here at IBM. Like not just in terms of professionally, but also like emotionally too, because especially it's like my mom passed away too. And she kind of became her, as well as like others like Matt and things like that, became kind of like this, like a support system, which I could not have had even outside of IBM, honestly. So, and I just grew from there. And since I was like advocated early, I managed to connect to like the BRG heads at the time, Matt as well as Paul, and started like creating these communities, which now this is a part of. And so I mean, I guess it helped that I basically helped organize things in grad school as well. I don't know. It just became like easier. And I just want things to be like easier, so that it'll be a lot easier for people to disclose and be accepted, basically, is what I'd like ultimately want. And I feel like it's getting easier day by day. We just had like this recent like thing. I'm not sure if you noticed in the chat, like we had like this recent thing about different HR processes being worked through the Neurodiversity Council, for example, at work, and that's like a phenomenal change, which I'm really happy about. So yeah, there's lots of good stuff, but I just realized, I don't know. I mean, well, I know other people haven't, because of the way I've framed it. Disclosing has always been a positive to me in my professional setting, at least after grad school, things like that. Especially since I know that not disclosing, like for example, when I didn't disclose to my friend in grad school, set me up in terms of people not accepting me in terms of like implicit bias and things like that. So I'm glad that I did. And at least I know now to disclose as soon as possible, because to make sure I advocate for myself as much as possible to prevent any miscommunication and prevent any explicit bias against me. So I know that now, and I got through my experience basically. It just took quite a while to get there, but I now know that, and I just talk about it to basically everyone. Because I mean, everyone knows that, at least at IBM, if there's a problem, things like that, I'd fight to the death for them. So, yep. That's
Awesome.
me.
Yeah, so for me, I've gone through a lot of trial and error of what hasn't worked for me in a work setting. Right out of school, my partner and I, it was, she's from Wisconsin, I'm from Ohio. For us, it was whoever gets the job first, the other will follow. She got a job in Wisconsin. I moved out there with a temporary job. And with that, I ended up working 6/12s. I worked 60 plus hours a week for over a month, on top of a 2-hour drive during my day. So I had really long days. I got burnt out after that. I took a different job, and that was your traditional 8 to 5 in the office. I did the same thing every day. It was extremely repetitive. After about 8 months, I was bored of just what I was doing. Also, just the office environment itself wasn't for me. Business casual, like I'm not one to be in dress clothes or anything business casual like that on the daily. It's just not who I am as a person. So we decided to take a gamble. We moved back to Ohio. As I was interviewing for places, I did a lot of looking of, what's your environment like? How friendly are you? Like, what is the work population age-wise? I was looking for a younger company. After being someplace that was more so middle-aged and older, it just wasn't my speed. There was also just my personal beliefs and how things were. It just didn't line up in the past. So I wanted to try to avoid that to make sure I was comfortable as possible. And I found Bell, and it's been a great experience. It's, kind of going forward. This past February, I had my annual review with my boss, and I was like, hey, like this has happened in the past year, and I need X, Y, and Z so I can succeed and everybody else we can get a working product out the door. And one of that is, I'm like, if we need to make edits on drawings or something, let's mark them up and send them back to me, because if I can see what's happening, it's a lot easier for me to understand. I'm definitely a visual learner in general. So a lot of conversations over the phone or something like that, a lot of times something would get missed. I would miss something, misinterpret something, and then, it would come back to me again and to change things. And, in the past 6 months now, it's really, a lot of things have changed, and it's been a lot more helpful, but it's also been a company-wide change as well. Having, more people back checking, we're actually sending checks back and corrections to make. So there's a trail essentially of what needs to get changed. And that's really been helpful. It also has been helpful that I'm pretty sure my office in general, I think everybody is some sort of neurodiverse. It is always interesting because you can tell those of us that are just functioning on a different plane, because we're everywhere at once. And honestly, sometimes it's been helpful to have the ADHD to follow trains of thoughts, because it can get chaotic. And now I can work on 6 different things during the week, and it's all different, and it's still stimulating, but I'm still familiar enough with everything that I'm not jumping out on a limb now, and I'm unsure of it, but I'm still getting what I need of the variety of work. I'm definitely one where I need to see things progress. And, now as we've kind of gotten back into the office a little more, I'm now on our DEI committee. We're getting that up on the website now, kind of getting it off the ground and rolling, different things, and, really getting the understanding of, we're all different. We all have different things. Understanding that if somebody has that bad day, there might be something else going on. And work as an overall cares about how we're doing personally. Myself, I was working remotely for 4.5 months, taking care of my grandmother this year, as she was going through cancer treatments. And it, had I been at my last job, it wouldn't have been possible to even just be like, all right, I'm disappearing for the next at least 3 months. I don't know when I'll be back. Just send me stuff and I'll get it done and turn it around. And it's such a relief in some way to know that's happening. Shoo, Velcro, go lay down, go. And just having that understanding, like this back in February after the company meeting, we rolled out everybody gets one personal wellness day a month to, take the day off, it's paid, go do what you need to do, like recharge those batteries because it can get stressful. And it's really the encouragement of use your PTO as well, like whatever you have, we can only roll over half of it into the next year. And it's the encouraging of go take that vacation, go take the time off, because you'll be better off long term. You won't hit burnout and then coming back and just being refreshed. And that it's such a weird thing because I've also worked construction in the past, and that's just go, go, go and forget about your personal life. And it's been very different for me in the past 2 years to be someplace where it's not go, go, go. We're not going to worry about you until you're spent, and then that's it. And it's just a very, very different. But it's been good. So.
I think that's wonderful. And thank you both, Bill and Ronnie. I think some of these conversations are really important to understand that it's okay to advocate for yourself and to shop around and kind of figure out what's going to be your best fit. And I think that kind of leads us into my next kind of question and topic that I want to really talk about is what is the most important for you at work, and what are some of the things that are most supportive for you at work? So I know for me, it's being able to be honest and open. And I think a lot of times we see people who are on the lowest level or entry level kind of jobs who are with cognitive disabilities or disabilities in general. And I want to use autism itself as an example. A lot of times the narrative is we can't be in management because we don't know how to talk with people, or that particular line of thinking. And making sure that you're open and honest, and when you're talking with somebody, and you give clear boundaries and clear information about what you want. And if you don't understand something, you say it. So a lot of times when I'm working, I come into a lot of colloquialisms. So like things that I have no clue what they mean. Like butter the bread on both sides. I was like, what does that mean? I was like, I have no clue what that means. I was like, oh, that means that we're double dipping. Like we're trying to like get it in. Like, Okay, I'm tracking. I
This is by itself-
understand.
That's by itself one, double dipping, so.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, there's another one, and it's like we hear all of these things, and then like sometimes a lot of these things are like tied in and like tracked with things that might not be the most PC anyways, and we probably shouldn't be talking about it, and we probably shouldn't be saying it that way in the first place. But I've never seen so many people sweat whenever you try to have somebody explain what, like, quote, opening the kimono means. And I'm like, why are we even using this phrase in the first place? That's extremely racist. Okay. But I think being open and honest about that and saying, if you use these types of phrases, I won't understand what you're talking about. So let's communicate, and I will remind you and say, could you clarify that for me, please? Because I won't understand, and it's more important for me to understand than it is for me to quote save face and say, oh yeah, of course I understand, nods heads, very confused, and I that's probably been some of the biggest thing for me, is making sure that I am in an environment where it is safe for me to be open. I make sure that I vet the people. Since I'm a contractor, I work only on federal contracts. I make sure I know the people who I'm going to work on my contracts with, and know that they can talk to me. My coach, I was talking with her last year, and I was like, well, they didn't say they needed it. So, like that, if you don't tell me a deadline, I'm not going to give it to you. And then realizing, okay, well, that's a little bit on me too. So I need to be asking for that information. I need to advocate for myself, and I need to make sure that I am setting myself up to be successful. And I am in a work environment that allows me to do so. And the other thing that's really important to me that Bill touched on a little bit is the advocacy groups. So making sure that there are community groups, and there's groups that can kind of commiserate with what I'm saying, and realizing if I say I am completely overwhelmed, my brain is 100% fogged, and I've had way too much interaction, I can't function right now. People understand. They're like, oh yeah, I had a day like that the other week. So, but actually having that type of a community and being able and safe to be able to present that. I also have a physical disability. I have paralysis in my right eye that gives me incredible migraines, and because my eyes are trying to like figure out what's going on, and they can't move. That also being able to say like, hey, you might not be able to realize this. I might be able to mask this pretty well, but I'm having a really bad pain day, and I have to take off. I'm sorry that the deadline is whenever, but I have to take off. And knowing that there is that kind of flexibility is really nice too. Bill, do you want to jump in?
Sure. All right. What was the question? Give me the actual question.
Right. So like, what are some of the really important aspects for you at work that you need to have to like feel included, or what's like super important from you from like a disability standpoint?
Sure. I like challenging work. So I need work that is actually like stimulating for me. That can be a problem sometimes in industry, where sometimes you can just get some really boring stuff, or so I realize I have to try to seek myself to get challenged, whether that be a more complicated project or something, or the patent work I do at IBM or things like that. I just try to get myself to make sure I get that stimulated feeling. Because like when I get like that, that's when I get like my autistic highs, basically. And when I get my autistic highs, I could probably work myself to death if I wanted to, depending on. But the good thing is, like, because of that, I actually make sure I get to the point where I can get those autistic self special interest highs. When I get that, I can be like really. I mean, that's just like the basic bread and butter for me in terms of me being able to feel good. Like, I mean, like for autistics, it's basically kind of the equivalent of like for non-autistics for socializing, basically. And so like having like that in the context of data science, or more, it's more than data science. So it's also like the neurodiversity work that I do, to all the inclusion stuff I've been doing, all the stuff I've just been learning in so many different areas. Like I've just been like studying things like cultural dimensions, which I never thought I'd be doing. I went to APOR I forgot what week it was, either last week or the week before last week. And that was just great, just to be there, because that was a completely new field for me. Having like the support I have and knowing I have like a good sense of career path. I mean, I guess I'm honestly might be kind of impatient, but there's just lots. And so my career is also really important to me, because I know, especially because of how much support I've gotten and how much exposure I got, which I am honestly like really lucky I've gotten relative to other people. And all the knowledge I've gotten, I know I kind of like can be a little impatient in that area, but there's just like just so many other stuff in terms of like inclusion. I mean, I've had like the seniors engineers and fellows like actually thank me personally for the neurodiversity stuff work I've been doing. And like, I mean, it's one thing just to hear from soldiers normally just in the HR or the RNI space, but like the actual people who respect you intellectually in your like your actual work, support like that, like who were like nearby and everything, that they mean like basically just tear up and like, yeah, it's become like hope basically. So I've been able to have a point like gotten many people comfortable in terms of like I've listened to their specific struggles, or they've managed to being able to help in a way which I've never done before in my life, because I've never felt I've actually like given back before. And the fact that I can give back now at work has just been like just so like just meaningful to me as well. So there's just like a lot. I'm just really grateful, honestly, just for being here, being at IBM. I think it would be really hard to actually like ever actually like choose anything else, but just because I just found not so much just found the community, I've created communities. That's just something you can't even think of like possibly doing a company of like over hundreds of thousands of people. But I've helped to do that, and like we've like gotten to the point like we've gotten like the neurodiversity symbol, which was ultimately because of like the actual autistic squad like hinting towards the people like we need to use this, not the puzzle piece thing like that at the time. And like we've gotten like they were in Brazil of all places. They were putting lights up in Brazil in the building just to have the neurodiversity symbol. That was just like so beautiful to me. It's just like this different to seeing like that much, not necessarily just your own impact, but just seeing how you've just helped others, and just not even necessarily yourself, but your network and all your as a community as a whole. It's just like just so much more meaningful. I kind of feel the whole thing. So it's far more than just one thing, I think. But I'm just getting to the point where I'm just realizing like there's more and more, and I get more excited with just both my career parts and also my other parts. Just hard actually just the thing. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Gary, I'll go ahead and answer your question too with this. For me, with what I need out of work, I've turned my cubicle went from pretty drab to I've hung up lights. I've got carpet in there. I have a standing desk. I can bring my dogs to work with me, which has been phenomenal. So I have a giant shaped U desk now that I've gated off part that's open so they can stay next to me. And I don't have to worry about them running around the office all the time. But being with work and, starting up and being one of the founding members of our DEI community, one of my other pet projects is actually to get into schools, whether it be college level, high school, younger, and to really talk about the landfill industry happens, because a lot of people don't see what happens to their garbage after they put it out on the curb every week. And I'm in a unique place because, you know, besides being the neurodivergent, I'm a trans man, being the queer kid, and just, you know, I've got different levels of experience, and being in such a male dominated field as a whole, I've gotten two very different sides of that spectrum itself. And it's very different. And for me, work has been great. They're like, great, you want to do it? Let's try it and see what happens. There's never a, oh no, we should think about this. It's like, okay, let's try it once and see what happens. And it's just nice being able to do different things. Just like my boss understands and the other project managers understand that I like special pet projects. So like I have an interest in stormwater. So a lot of times if we get a site that has stormwater issues, they'll send it my way, whether it's engineering, or I also dabble in our compliance department and doing compliance inspections every quarter. And it's nice to be able to get out and do different things, and being able to have that interaction with our clients, with people, being able to answer those questions and not being just on the technical side and hiding behind a computer screen all day. And, you know, going forward, work also understands, like this week, you know, I worked 2 10-hour days, Monday, Tuesday. Yesterday, I got in early, but I walked out at 4 because I'm like, I'm burnt for the day, can't focus anymore. My eyeballs hurt after staring at my screens. And, you know, just being able to get up and walk away. And at my past place of employment, you know, if I was having a day or just couldn't focus on the screen, you know, I was expected to still be there and still be productive until I hit my 8 hours for the day. Or, you know, if it was overtime, then it was going to have to be overtime for the week. And it was just such a toxic environment to be in, because not understanding that some people have really good weeks where they're really productive, and then there's the off chance of you just can't do something some weeks because your mind and your body just tell you no. And it's, you know, seeing different environments has been interesting, I'll say at least. But it was there and now it's gone. Like Liz talked about the onion, as you figure one thing out, something else happens. And have been doing a little more reading into autism and different things. And it is, especially for me, the neurodiversity is in my family genetically. So the fact that it took me to 27 to get diagnosed with ADHD when my younger brother has been diagnosed since he's been about 5, it's been interesting. So that's kind of my next layer, as you know, as I approach my 30s now, is that, you know, how much more am I going to reveal of myself? And I'm glad I'm someplace that's supportive and will be there with me through it.
And if you're comfortable with Gary's question too, Ronnie.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I'm down to speak to anybody.
Awesome.
Sort of
Actually, I was going to ask if all 3 of you might be interested to speak to the neurodivergent students that I work with.
Yeah, I would be very, very pleased to do any of that. And
Awesome.
I will make sure that we get emails or phone numbers or whatever so that we can connect.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all. And Ronnie and I actually went to undergrad together. So that's one of the reasons why we know each other so well. And we're really close. So, but anyways, so a little bit about what Ronnie was talking about, sometimes too, being a woman, it's a lot harder to get diagnosed as autistic, and especially growing up in the 90s, right? And growing up in the 90s, it was even extremely hard to get diagnosis ADD as a woman, because a lot of the scales, from like a disability history kind of perspective, a lot of the scales were built and tested only on white little boys, and their measure their measures are a little bit different than white girls or people of color or women in general. So trying to understand that, or non-binary people, etc., like trying to understand that relationship and realizing that understanding yourself isn't a static thing. It is a constant way of trying to understand who you are and how's the best way that you work. And even understanding my diagnoses honestly has helped me so much in my personal life. Like, it helps me with my, like, dealing with my family on a regular basis. So like how I talk to them and how I understand like some of the ways that they are talking and some of the ways that I am talking, and realizing, okay, I might feel extremely strongly on this, but I guess they're kidding, so maybe I should like back off a little bit, so understanding that there is that dynamic and understanding how I communicate with people has helped me not only in the work setting, but outside of the work setting. So that has been huge for me. And even as a little kid, I remember my parents always saying, like, pick your battle, right? What are you going to be upset about, right? And I never understood that. I was like, but you're wrong. Like, there is no like other option. You're just wrong. Like, and realizing like, okay, yeah, yeah, that's my autism coming out. Like, I just don't understand that. But now I can say they can be wrong, but I don't have to fixate on it, right? Like, I can just understand and like go forward with a lot of this. And I have better understanding myself and going into therapy and having them convince me to get tested. That was crucial for me and my development. So I guess probably my biggest advice is to, especially for students and for anybody trying to get into industry or be happy in a job or a new work setting or an old work setting, is just to be honest with yourself. And to fully bring all of you to the table, right? So be in an environment where you feel comfortable bringing all of you to the table, because we might have skewed some things as that it might be a negative thing, but I honestly think a lot of my neurodiversity is a really positive thing for me. I think very differently than other people, and that gives me a very different perspective on life. It gives me a different perspective on my projects, gives me a different focus, and that makes me a lot more creative and a lot more valuable in my work setting. And being able to encourage other individuals to be open, if I encourage anybody else to be open and comfortable with who they are by me being open about who I am, that makes me really happy. So I think that's something that I'm super passionate about.
All right. By the way, about the male to female, I mean, I guess this context is cis rates or something, or just I mean, the gendered, I don't know how to describe it. I'm sorry about my language is like, so this article I had found recently, I haven't a chance to take a look at it, but so the ratios for like male to female diagnosis is like 4 to 1 or 3 to 1 in the context of like male to female. But this one is talking about the actual rates, and it's found like it's much closer to equality. So that's interesting in terms. So I just wanted to show that too if you haven't seen it before.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can give out a transcript of the chat too, along with everything, so we can keep some of this really good information. And if anybody is actually interested in some of like the disability history aspect of neurodiversity, et cetera, that was a very small facet of my PhD. So that is like a passion aspect for me. So if anybody wants to chat about it, I'm always open for that. But
Hey Liz, do you want to nerd out with this article, looking at it through me with me?
of course, I always want to nerd out.
Okay, cool. Let's set up a time.
So
We could do Memorial weekends or something unless you have plans. So
the other thing, the one last thing I wanted to say was I wanted to make sure I asked our speakers if they had anything they wanted to add before I just open up to questions and free-flowing comments from the audience, etc. So, Bill or Ronnie, do you have any general vibes that you want to add or anything before we open it up?
I mean, honestly, find your people. That's probably like my general rule of thumb. I like one thing. You need to be able to find your people in terms of like who you actually will accept you for who you are. I mean, regardless that be for you personally or at work or things like that. You need a community like that and a support system, because you can't do this stuff by yourself, especially if in the larger disability community. You need to be able to have these support systems. I would not be where I am without the support system I've helped create for myself, and I've helped with other people, and I know plenty of others who either have been screwed because they haven't had something like that, or didn't know there were people like that. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is finding the weird that clashes real well with your weird.
Yeah.
Because there's some people are just like, whoa, no, and walk slowly away, and other people just come running at you, and that really makes all the difference, is finding the jive.
Absolutely. I love that, Ronnie. I love how you said that. And I think something that I think it resounds very well with me is be true to yourself, right? If you aren't willing to open up, and you're not willing to disclose and really count your disability and as who you are, at least part of who you are, right? It's going to be really hard to find people who understand you, and really hard to find the people that vibe with you, especially at work and in your social life. I think it's an important thing about life, and I think being in communities that are supportive. I was already with my husband when I was diagnosed, and he was like, okay, yeah, 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 that was the thing. I knew this. And like he told his mom, and she was like, I could see that. and she's like the sweetest woman, and she was like, you know what? Yeah, but yeah. She's like, I like her. So, I mean, being with the right people, if you are your authentic self, you will be accepted, and it's better to be accepted for your authentic self than be accepted for somebody who you aren't. And I guess that's like my biggest thing that I think about whenever I try to advocate for disability. So I guess, well, it is 8:30, so we've gone for an hour and a half. Before we close up or anything, technically we still have a half an hour, but I wanted to make sure that we had some availability to talk with the people who have been listening to us chat this whole time. And I know that some of us have been in the chat, and that's been fantastic too. So yeah, I'll stop talking so we can open it up.
I have a question for all three of you. Who was your most significant mentor, and what specifically did they do to empower you in your journey?
Okay, I can go first because I have two, and oh man. So one, I have to say my great uncle. He just passed this past year, but he was an engineer, and before I knew him, he was an engineer for the government, and he always kind of like ran to the beat of his own drum, you know, and that kind of helped me and made me realize that I can be really girly and still be tomboy-y at the same time, and that's okay. And I can wear high heels with kitties on them and be in the machine shop, and that's okay. And I can be like working on an engine and in a cute dress, and that's still okay. Or, you know, I can have an off day and be in sweats, and it's still okay, you know. And so he was super inspirational to me. He taught me a ton of different things just growing up, and fantastic human in general. But the other, he actually gave me my engineering ring too, so that was really cool. But the other individual would be Dr. Ken Reed. He helped me in my undergrad when I thought I was going to do mechanical engineering, and he's like, really? And he actually was like my dad away from home. And whenever I actually like disclosed to him a lot of my disabilities, some of my like past trauma with like sexual assault and all that kind of stuff. And he was always there to fight for me. He was always there to not only fight for me and hover, like super hover, but he would sit there and be like, you got this, you can do this yourself, you don't need me, like you got this.
Police.
And I think that to me was super impactful, you know, like, and he actually moved to Virginia Tech as a professor at Virginia Tech right after I graduated in undergrad. So we went to the same grad school. So like when I was in grad school, he was a professor at my grad school too. So we kind of transitioned together. I was able to work with him forever, and he's a fantastic human. He really helped shape me into who I am, and probably is one of the biggest reasons why I stuck it out through engineering.
I kind of knew that's where you were going to go. So I have two. Both are from college. One is Susan. She was my co-op advisor. What turned into just the advisor-advisee relationship has turned into a friendship. I still talk to Susan pretty regularly now, even though she is now the director of the Toledo Technical Academy. And Susan was there for me through some really hard times in college and still is there now. Like Dr. Reed was for Liz, Susan was my mom away from home. She kind of did that for the entire civil department. She was everybody's mom if you needed it. And then my second is Dr. Sydney Gruden. She was one of the civil professors. Sometimes when you look at somebody and like go, that is somebody I can trust with things. She was one of them. I ended up doing an undergrad research project with her and, had a lot of things in common. She's now the dean at the University of New Hampshire and we still talk every now and then. Everything's been busy, moving, different things, but I do credit those two because there was a push from both of them of you can do it, you got this, like just don't give up on yourself.
That's amazing.
All right. As for me, I mentioned before, Beth Rudden is my current mentor, and probably one I'm also like closest to. I mean, like emotionally and otherwise, she's just like been absolutely fantastic for me. I mean, technically, she's been like great in terms like especially making me understand the business and business problems because going from like physics, like academia to where business is, like I had no clue how to actually craft like a data science problem, things like that. It was alien to me. So she really helped me understand the business of IBM and understand like all the hidden stuff you don't necessarily know from low level in terms of like the executive stuff. And it's just been like tremendous for me. Like I've just like kind of just felt like I just accelerated from there, honestly. I could see myself in a place I could not have without her. And so I don't know. I just feel like forever grateful for her. Like in grad school, I didn't have a lot of confidence. I mean, I compared myself. I was just miserable, because I don't know. Let me have just social comparisons, but like she's gotten me like the grounding, and I think it's kind of mutual. Honestly, I've helped give her grounding too. I just have a level of confidence in myself, which I've never had in my career before. So, I mean, I certainly had imposter syndrome in grad school. I could simply say I don't have it now, but it's a lot because of like people like her who've always believed in me, I think. So, yeah, that's what I have to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think, Daniel, you have a question. You have your hand raised.
Yeah, first I want to, Liz, thank you for posting this for us and doing such a wonderful job. And Bill and Ronnie, thank you for agreeing to appear on our panel and share your perspective, share your insights. I know all of us have learned a lot. A while back, a couple of you mentioned some things regarding bringing neurodiverse candidates into employment, not screening people out inadvertently through the application process. We talked about making sure that neurodiversity and I would say disabilities of all kinds are included in diversity statements. And then someone also made the point of making sure that the accommodation process for any kind of pre-interview testing is separate from other elements of the application. Are there any other tips or tricks you can share with employers to make sure that they're not inadvertently or accidentally screening out neurodiverse talent and making sure that the application process is welcoming for candidates who want to apply?
Don't use things like HireVue, the ones that specifically like try to like scan your facial features and say, okay, this is a good candidate. It's literally illegal in the context of the ADA. The federal government just made a whole thing about that explicitly, not including just large facial recognition in general. Do not do that. That's like an absolute, like an obvious one. Larger scale picture. I mean, I mean, things like autistic candidates, like even if we don't necessarily make a good impression, that doesn't mean it's we're bad candidates in turn like that, especially for when I've actually seen it. It might be a good idea to actually move toward the kind of thing of more of like a trial, and rather than like a specific, just like a one-time interview kind of a thing. I know like that could be like kind of more expensive for some employers, things like that, but it's something I honestly think might be like better rather than like I know that Microsoft has been doing these things kind of like these like workshops for like these 2-week things basically for interview processes. And I know it's longer, but at least gives you like more in terms of more than just like the initial first impressions in terms of like leveraging like what kind of skills they have specifically, things like that. So one
of my big things is, and this is kind of pertinent for me, because we are helping the project that I am on at IBM, we're actually looking directly at government agencies that are doing a hiring mandate right now. So looking at and trying to make sure that we're putting that A in the DEIA aspect, so the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So one of the big things for me is you're not going to get diverse people who have disabilities if your application is inaccessible. And if that process is a process that is extraordinarily difficult for a disabled individual, they are going to self-select out, period. I was talking with previous places I won't, or where I've done advocacy, I won't disclose, but if your application can't be read by a screen reader, or it's incredibly difficult to be read by a screen reader, or there's video and it doesn't have audio description, or whatnot, whatever, or you have a timer that's ticking down every 5 seconds, and you're sitting there and somebody who has chronic anxiety and ADHD and they can't focus on doing the task because they're sitting there watching the clock go down. You know, so things like those particular elements, if you utilize those particular elements, you're going to weed out a lot of your talent. So if your process is inaccessible, you're not going to have people who need the accessible aspects that are hired. So that's a big element for me, whether that's autism, deaf, blind, whatever you have, or flexibility. Say you had multiple sclerosis and you have to go to a doctor's appointment and there's no flexibility to reschedule a meeting, you know, or an interview, you know, having those particular things, that's not unprofessional. That's just life, you know, and making it seem like it's unprofessional is really just ableist in general. So understanding that, yeah, if the process is inaccessible, you're not going to get disabled people. And we see that a lot in government work. So the process is so tedious, and a lot of times it's so difficult to even apply that there are only like 2%, 5% of people in an organization that have a disability. And those are only the people that feel comfortable disclosing. So, and the other thing is making sure that you have a disability and inclusion and diversity and inclusion statement that includes disability on your application. So when you're applying and when you're interviewing individuals, to say, we have these type of communities, we have communities for Hispanic individuals, we have communities for neurodiversity, we have communities for disabled individuals, and these are some of the benefits that we provide as a company. Mm-hmm. If you say that up front, you're going to be attracting more diverse people who have disabilities.
Liz,
Yes.
first of all, let me say this was incredibly educational. So thank you all panel members. I wish we had had this earlier in the year. I'm particularly focused because I represent a student that is neurodiverse. I just wanted to say that this has been an outstanding meeting. I've learned so much just listening, and I like to talk, as everyone knows. But let me ask the following. You talked about the mentorship, and the mentors that all of you mentioned were largely the people that you met in the university system. And you talked about finding, I think it was Ronnie that said, finding the weirdness that matches your weirdness. I think it was Ronnie, might have been Bill, but.
Oh no, that was Ronnie.
That was Ronnie, okay. Here's the thing, when you have a young student that's in a university, is away from home, are there any sources or resources that you guys can make available that I can distribute? Because I do think that's part of the, how do you find that group? I mean, I had that problem when I lost my vision. Not a problem. I could just go to the NFB. It's full of blind people. So, I think people should find their group. But what happens when you're somewhat isolated? Is there online forums? Is there something that I can make available to my young charge? He's a brilliant young man, but I think to have that mentorship, I try to mentor, but I'm a blind Black guy. So we have some things in common because we're both coders, but that's why I'm very eager to get you guys to meet with him or talk to him, interview with him, whatever. I think he needs to find other people that are in his lane, or at least understand his lane from a personal level, not from a clinical level.
Absolutely. Thank you for speaking up, Gary, and thank you for your kind words. I was really excited for this, and I want to reiterate again, yes, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Ronnie, for enjoying or letting me steal some of your time. I think this is a fun event, and I am sure that we can do something in the future along these lines too. And I think personally, yes, there are resources, and I think us as a foundation for Pieces of Me, we should be creating some of these curated lists for
Absolutely.
having communities and community space that is open to different types of individuals, different types of disabilities, etc. So I think
You
that
guys
is
can be
something.
mentors.
Yes, yes. And I think that would be perfect, So I'll let somebody other than me speak because I've been talking a lot, but yeah.
I know for me personally, a lot of my group in college was my classmates. There was about 5 of us that we traveled through all of our classes together, and to this day we still all talk on the regular. Just saw one of my friends, him and his wife just had a baby. Actually, there's now 2 out of the group. There's 3 kids between them now. And it became our own little family, essentially. Yeah. But also getting involved in some other activity in school helps to make those connections. You might not be, completely comfortable at first, but you'll start to find a place. Right. And I guess I'm going to circle back to the last question too. The biggest thing, at least that I faced, is when companies, especially for recent grads, they look at GPA. And, once, if you don't have a 3.5 or you don't have a 3, they're just tossing your resume, when in reality, somebody like myself that had that lower GPA, we know what we're doing. It's just on paper. If you throw a piece of paper and say, do this in an hour, it's not going to work out. But usually those are the people that, might not have all the smarts, but they have the communication skills or other softer skills that actually, they make them a more well-rounded candidate. And it also plays back to, just being involved in general throughout school. personally, I was involved in Concrete Canoe, and going through that process, you learn different skills when you hang out with different groups of people as
Right.
well. And it's weird how it happens, because I found it easier to make friends in college than I do now post college.
One of my
Nobody gives you
biggest
the
things,
guidebook after school.
kind of following with like what Ronnie was saying. So Ronnie and I were in Greek life together, and I think one of the biggest things for me, even though our Greek life was engineering focused, was finding something outside of academia, outside of the academic, that you are doing to build community. So I was a band kid. I've always been a band kid. And I've always done marching band, and that was my release, period. I did, even with 20 credits every semester, I did marching band for 2 years in college. And that was probably one of the best things in my life. I would have stayed longer if the director was more accepting of individuals who did not have music degrees as like their degree, instead of, there's a reason why there was only one engineer in the whole marching band, but besides the point. I then did flute choir. So I then played the flute with a bunch of other ladies and guys and individuals in general, and was able to take time out of my day every week just to actually bond with people over something that wasn't school. And that was super important to me. So yeah, that's what I did. And don't take all of the credits, because don't do that. Space it out. It's okay.
Yeah.
Are you guys on LinkedIn, Bill and Ronnie?
Yep. I
Excellent.
will grab it. I don't know, or how do we want to do this, Liz?
I can send it out. No worries. Just message me and I'll send everything out.
Sounds good.
Fantastic. And I definitely will be reaching out to all three of you.
All right, sounds good.
I'm wonderful. And stay tuned for in the fall. I'm hoping to do another one of these sessions with academia. So it's focusing more just on navigating academic jobs, trying to get like academic jobs in grad school and that kind of stuff. So navigating how you get into grad school as being neurodiverse and et cetera, and your experience and what's important in general. So stay tuned for that. And I'm excited. I think this went swimmingly. So
Outstanding. No, it's outstanding. This was absolutely the student I've been talking about all evening. He's on vacation with his family. Otherwise, I would have strongly encouraged him to attend. This would have been, I think, extremely helpful to him personally. And again, I will be reaching out. I've been with this young man for like 8 months.
I love it. I love it.
He's really breaking through, but I think this would be the watershed. I mean, he needs to see other coders out there making it happen in real business world. He's very talented, extremely talented. I'm tearing up just because I know if he sees and hears this will ring a bell with him. That's my thing. Right.
That sounds perfect.
So I will be working to make that happen for sure.
Thank you for sure, Gary. And before we close, I wanted to see if there is any other questions that we have or comments in general before we close out. All right, hearing none, I think we will close out. I want to thank again Pieces of Me and Bill and Ronnie for joining us. And I'm excited to do this again in the future. And we get to share more knowledge with different people. So thank you all for listening. And I hope you guys have a great evening.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for doing this.
Absolutely, my pleasure.